Ukrainian armed forces have launched British Storm Shadow cruise missile into Russian territory for the first time, Bloomberg reported on Wednesday, citing an anonymous Western official familiar with the matter. The strike using Storm Shadow missiles was in response to Kremlin deploying North Korean troops in the war in Ukraine, according to the anonymous source. A spokesperson for Prime Minister Keir Starmer refused to answer the question on the attack, saying his office would not be commenting on operational matters. The United Kingdom had previously allowed Ukraine use Storm Shadow cruise missiles only within Ukraine. Earlier, Joe Biden approved Ukraine's use of Army Tactical Missile System, ATACMS, in attacks deep into Russia in Washington's major policy shift with regards to Russia-Ukraine war. In response to Biden's decision, Vladimir Putin revised his country's nuclear doctrine, lowering the threshold for the use of these weapons. Kremlin argued that removing the limit on the use of long-range missiles would fuel the war. Ukraine struck an ammunition depot in Russia's Bryansk region with ATACMS this week. Kyiv had long been pressuring its Western allies to remove limit on the use of long-range missiles. It should be noted that the Storm Shadow is a Franco-British low-observable, long-range air-launched cruise missile. As the conflict in Ukraine approaches its 1,000th day, the Russian military's losses have reached colossal proportions, becoming a major topic of discussion in think tanks. More than 400,000 killed and wounded, and more than 150,000 confirmed deaths, represent the worst losses in modern warfare. Moscow faces challenges that could determine the future of its military campaign. Research by independent journalists and Western intelligence agencies shed light on the true scale of the losses, writes the New York Times. According to independent Russian publications Mediazona, BBC, and Meduza, the total number of Russian soldiers killed since the start of the war has reached 150,000. This data is confirmed by an analysis of notarial records, obituaries and excess mortality statistics. But this is only the tip of the iceberg. Adding the seriously wounded who never returned to the battlefield, the number of irreparable losses exceeds 400,000. This figure already exceeds the losses of any industrial power since World War II. Many of the dead are young men who were working yesterday, building families, and not thinking about war. Russia is paying a terrible price for its ambitions, comments military analyst Olga Ivshina. Western assessments, even more gloomy forecasts US and NATO intelligence agencies put the toll even higher, at 600,000 to 700,000 killed and wounded. Despite the limitations of the methods used to calculate it, these figures include both the dead and the lightly wounded. The Pentagon is using satellite imagery, communications interceptions and open-source analysis to get a more complete picture, although Western experts point out that Russia is hiding real data, making the task more difficult. In response to the losses, Russia has accelerated the recruitment of contract soldiers and mobilized soldiers. In June, the Russian Defense Ministry announced that there were 33 million people fit for service, but according to journalists, only about 900 people join the army every day. Russia is also actively recruiting foreign fighters. A recent Pentagon report indicates that Moscow has formed a joint force of 50,000 Russian and North Korean troops for operations on the Eastern Front. However, as analysts note, even these measures do not cover current losses. A war of attrition inevitably tests the strength of the army and the state. Losses of hundreds of thousands killed and wounded undermine not only Russia's numerical superiority, but also its economy, social stability and the trust of citizens. The question that remains open is whether the Kremlin is prepared to continue this war at any cost, or will it have to reconsider its ambitions? In the face of such losses, more and more experts are asking, how much longer can Russia endure? Russian air defenses can effectively intercept long-range missiles, experts polled by Izvestia Daily said. They can be downed by S-300 and S-400 long-range surface-to-air missile systems during their flight and by S-350, Tor and Pantsir air defense systems in their final flight path. However, Russia's Smolensk, Kaluga, Lipetsk, Voronezh, and Kursk regions, as well as Crimea and the Krasnodar region, can be exposed to the use of weapons with a range of 300 kilometers by Ukraine, experts warn. Commenting on a potential zone of destruction, former Lieutenant General Aitek Bizov, who previously served as Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the Joint CIS Air Defense System, told Izvestia that if fired from the Kiev-controlled area of Kherson, an ATACMS missile can hit Kerch on the Crimean Peninsula, which would pose a threat to the Crimean Bridge. Missiles fired from the Zaporozhye region can target all of Crimea. The bordering zone of Kursk will also be exposed, he added, as well as Voronezh in central Russia and other major cities and areas. But it is important to mention here that we have destroyed both Storm Shadows and ATACMS missiles, and there have been no unsolvable issues with downing those, the expert said with confidence. Military expert Viktor Litovkin agrees. In an interview with Rossiyskaya Gazeta, he said that such missiles have long been used in the Special Military Operation Zone, and Russian air defense systems have been able to detect and counter them effectively. In general, these Western-provided long-range missiles are far from new, as they were first tested in 1988, and in 1991 they were used for the first time during Operation Desert Storm, Litovkin explained. Hence, we know what we are dealing with. All our anti-missile systems, from Pantsers to S-400s, can down ATACMS. At the same time, massive or coordinated missile strikes can be especially dangerous, he warned. The expert suggested that, among other reasons, Ukraine has lately intensified drone attacks on Russian territory to conduct training before launching ATACMS. He views the British-French Storm Shadow/Scalp missiles as much more dangerous, as they can fly at ultra-low altitudes, and the missile body is made of radio-absorbing materials, which reduces the likelihood of their detection. However, even though these missiles have a longer range of around 560 kilometers, Russian air defense systems have learned to counter them, too, he concluded.